Welcome to the Deep Dive. We've got Darius Foroux's Think Straight here, and we're going to dig into it.
Yeah, the goal is to pull out the really practical stuff, the ideas you can, use right away to think a bit clearer, a bit sharper.
Exactly. A shortcut to the core insights, basically.
Yeah.
Because you're busy.
And Foroux interesting because he's not just academic. He's an entrepreneur, blogger, podcaster.
Co-founded a tech company too, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's coming from a very real-world place, not just theory.
And he kicks off with that William James quote, which is pretty powerful. If you can change your mind, you can change your life. Sets the whole thing up.
It really does. And that leads straight into the first big idea, how fundamentally you become what you think.
Okay, let's get into that.
Well, what's really compelling, I think, is William James's own story. Foroux shares how James went through this intense crisis of meaning.
After Harvard.
Yeah. Battling depression, even suicidal thoughts. This wasn't abstract for him. He was really wrestling with his own mind.
And it wasn't just a short phase either. Foroux mentions his editor saying James spent a lot of his life actively choosing not to end it.
Yeah, it gives you a sense of the struggle. But there was a turning point. Foroux highlights James reading this essay by Charles Renouvier, a French philosopher.
On free will.
On free will, exactly. And James had this realization, he wrote about it basically, that he could choose to hold on to one thought even with others swirling around.
So it wasn't just passive thinking, he could direct it.
Right. He realized he had some control. And this is the key for you, the listener.
Yeah.
You're not just trapped by every thought. You can actually choose where to put your focus.
It's that shift, like Foroux says, from feeling like, oh, I can't help feeling this way, to, okay, I feel this, but I'm deciding how to respond.
Precisely. It's about reclaiming that agency. And Foroux connects it straight away to Emerson. You become what you think about all day long.
That sustained focus idea.
Really hammers home the impact.
Which kind of begs the question, doesn't it? Why do we even need a book on thinking? Isn't our brain supposed to be, amazing?
Well, yeah. The potential is huge. Foroux quotes Robert Greene calling the brain the most. What was it? Miraculous, awe-inspiring information processing tool.
Sounds impressive.
It is. But then, there's the reality check. Foroux brings in Dan O'Reilly's point about the illusion of control.
We think we're rational, but maybe not so much.
Often, yeah. I mean, just look at cognitive biases. There are over 100 identified now. These are like systematic glitches in our thinking.
Like confirmation bias, where you just look for stuff that proves you right.
That's a classic one. We all do it. It just shows we don't always use this incredible tool effectively.
And that seems to be Foroux's whole motivation. He saw lots of books explaining why we think badly.
But not enough on how to actually change it. He wanted something practical.
And I like that he doesn't position himself as some, lofty expert.
Totally. He's very upfront. I'm not a neuroscientist, not a psychologist. His insights come from his own experience. Feeling like a, quote, slave to his thoughts.
Yeah, he talks about his own journey, going from feeling stressed and kind of lost to consciously using his mind to build a, better life, happier, healthier, all that.
It makes it really relatable.
No.
And the core of his approach is this simple filter, useful versus useless thought.
Not positive or negative, just useful.
Yeah. Does this thought actually help you move forward? Does it serve a purpose? If not, maybe it's just noise. That's the filter you apply.
Okay. He brings in John Dewey too, right? The pragmatist. Yeah.
The true is that which works. Pragmatism is all about focusing on practical results in the real world.
But he warns against taking that too literally, doesn't he?
Oh, absolutely. It's not just do whatever feels good. Your thinking still needs to be grounded in, facts, different viewpoints. It's about being effective, not just impulsive.
Right. It's deliberate.
And that takes work, which leads to his next point. Clear thinking requires training. It's not automatic.
The mind is a muscle analogy.
Exactly. You got to exercise it. And he observes that lots of people kind of stop. After school, they prefer relaxing their brain over actually straining it.
Yeah, mental effort isn't always fun.
But it's necessary. He quotes Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher.
Going way back.
Yeah, saying clear thinking needs proper training. It's not haphazard. This isn't a new idea.
And Foroux even includes that drawing, right? His thoughts before he learned to think straight.
Yeah, it's just this chaotic scribble. It really visually shows that feeling of mental clutter most of us can probably relate to.
Definitely. Which perfectly sets up that story he tells. Moving to London.
Yes, the from chaos to clarity section.
Yeah.
So he moves to London, big move, and boom, last-minute housing crisis. His accommodation falls through.
Stressful.
Totally. And he admits his first reaction was panic. Overdramatic, he calls it. Just stuck in his head, blaming himself, worrying.
Classic useless thoughts loop.
Exactly. But then the turning point, he consciously decides, okay, think straight. He forces himself to shift.
From the swirling chaos
to focusing on just one useful thought. How do I find a place to stay?
And the visual contrast he uses is the messy cloud versus the single straight line.
And what happens? That focused thinking leads him straight to a practical solution. He books an Airbnb. Simple as that.
It's such a good example of how much worry is just based on assumptions and how focusing on solutions cuts through it.
Yeah, and he acknowledges, hey, we all do this useless worrying sometimes. It's common.
So, broadening the view a bit, he gives us this very brief history of thinking. Starts with Marcus Aurelius.
The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it, linking our inner world to the bigger picture.
And the point is, trying to master our thoughts isn't some new self-help trend.
Not at all. He touches on Confucius, Socrates, Descartes, William James. People have been grappling with this for centuries.
He mentions Socrates' questioning method and Descartes' I think, therefore I am.
Yeah.
Different angles on thinking about thinking.
Right. And he brings it back to a really practical challenge. Try writing down your own thoughts for a bit.
Just observe them.
Yeah. And you'll probably find, like Descartes did, that a lot of them are kind of nonsensical or contradictory. Just noticing that is the first step.
And questioning where belief come from.
Yeah.
Not just what you believe, but why. Is it facts or just stuff you picked up?
Exactly. Which ties back to James and pragmatism. Again, focus on the fruits, consequences, facts. Thoughts should lead somewhere useful.
Okay, so this leads into the idea that life is not linear.
Yeah, we have this tendency to imagine life as step A leads to step B leads to step C.
Get the degree, get the job, etc.
Right. But Foroux shares his own wake-up call, realizing a degree didn't automatically mean a job. Skills were what mattered. It challenges those neat, linear expectations.
And achieving goals often isn't linear either, right? There are detours, setbacks.
Totally. He uses a real estate example, how he had to look past the obvious limitations to find a way forward. Life throws curveballs.
So you need backup plans. Think about alternatives.
Exactly. Be adaptable. Don't get locked into one rigid path.
Next up, connect the dots. How does that fit in?
Well, he talks about how our brain is always working, connecting new info to what we already know, building these neural networks, creating new ideas.
Like connecting cities with roads in your brain.
Kind of like that, yeah. New experiences build new connections, and he uses that great Steve Jobs quote.
The one about connecting dots looking backward.
That's the one! You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward. You have to trust the process.
So the practical takeaway is you need to actually create those dots now.
Precisely. By learning, doing stuff, making mistakes, reflecting, you need to feed your brain the raw material so it can make those future connections.
Okay, but there's so much information out there. How do we handle it all?
Well, that's where filter your thoughts comes in. We're bombarded, so our brain develops shortcuts. Heuristics.
Mental shortcuts,
Right.
Like rules of thumb.
Exactly. Like trial and error, or doing what everyone else is doing, social proof, or just sticking with what's familiar.
But those aren't always reliable.
No, they have limitations. What worked before might not work now. What's popular might not be right for you.
So we come back to that pragmatic filter again. True is what works.
But applied carefully. Ask yourself, will the outcome of this choice really change how I live in a meaningful way?
And he uses his own move back from London as an example, right?
Yeah.
Choosing what genuinely worked for him, even if it looked odd to others.
Exactly. Filtering based on personal effectiveness.
Okay, so sometimes thinking straight means not thinking. Stop thinking.
Yeah, it sounds weird, but he makes a key distinction. Productive thinking versus just useless worrying, what he calls a preoccupied mind.
Like anxieties about work, self-doubt, relationship worries.
Yeah.
The usual suspects.
Right. And he asks, bluntly, what's the actual benefit of turning those over and over?
Usually none.
Pretty much. The point isn't that you can stop thoughts entirely. You can't. But you can choose which ones get your energy and attention, which ones you act on.
Be aware of the thought, but don't let it run the show.
Exactly. He talks about his own recurring thought of wanting to quit things and learning to just notice it without automatically obeying it, recognizing it as maybe just a fleeting feeling.
Okay, so how do we focus better? He talks about inside your control,
Yeah.
vs. outside your control.
Yeah, this is a really practical rule of thumb, basically. Focus your mental energy on things you can actually influence.
Like my actions, my words, my intentions.
Exactly. Your desires, what you choose to do. Useless thoughts, then, are pretty much anything outside that sphere of control that doesn't serve a clear purpose.
Like endlessly replaying the past. Or fantasizing about some lottery win.
Perfect examples. Total mental noise. He says useful thoughts generally fall into two camps: solving a specific problem or actively understanding and applying knowledge.
Everything else is kind of distraction.
That's the idea. Train your mind to avoid that constant aimless churning. Learn to consciously get out of your head sometimes.
But then he warns, don't trust your mind, after telling us to use it better.
Well, yeah, it's about recognizing its limitations. We're not purely logical creatures. We have those cognitive biases we talked about.
Right. The glitch is, he mentions attentional bias.
Yeah, how what you're currently thinking about literally affects what you notice in the world. And confirmation bias, again, seeking out proof for what you already think.
And there are tons of these biases.
Over 100? Yeah. So the takeaway is, your mind is powerful, but it's not infallible. Don't make huge decisions based only on your beliefs or what seems obvious.
Even science isn't immune, he says.
Because scientists are human too. They have biases. So the advice is to aim for a pragmatic, neutral viewpoint. Look at things from different angles.
It's not about the single best decision, maybe, but a better informed one.
That's it. And his practical tip, go check out the Wikipedia list of cognitive biases. Just being aware of them helps you spot them in your own thinking.
Which flows nicely into, look at facts.
Foroux really dislikes assumptions, even though, let's be honest, we all make them.
He quotes William James again here.
About the pragmatist clinging to facts and concreteness.
Yeah.
Grounding things in reality.
And he gives examples, right? Business decisions, personal life. How relying on facts versus assumptions leads to totally different places.
Huge difference. Basically, do your homework. Don't just guess.
He says maybe rely on gut feeling occasionally.
Only in really rare cases, like if you have zero facts and need a snap decision. But generally, avoid basing thoughts on just opinions or guesswork.
Okay, but then he makes this distinction. True vis untrue. How's that different from facts?
It's a subtle but important point. He's looking at truth in terms of personal impact. His example is belief in God.
Whether it's a scientific fact isn't the point for the believer.
Exactly. If that belief profoundly shapes their life and actions in a positive way, then for them it holds a powerful truth, regardless of scientific proof.
He quotes Nietzsche too. No facts, only interpretations.
Right. It highlights how subjective our view of reality is. We're all interpreting things through our own lens.
Which means maybe arguing about who's absolutely right isn't always the most useful approach.
Pretty much. It encourages a bit more humility and openness to other perspectives.
In today's world, take your time to think feels almost radical.
Doesn't it? But Foroux argues that fast thinking isn't necessarily smart thinking. He brings in Derek Sivers,
Who calls himself a slow thinker.
Yeah. Sivers believes our first reactions are often just old habits or knee-jerk responses, not real consideration.
So quick answers might just be impulsive.
Often, yes. Properly thinking something through actually takes time. Sivers even delayed answering emails deliberately to give himself that space.
And it's okay to say, I don't know.
Absolutely. Both to others and to yourself. Take the time you need. It's better than rushing to a bad conclusion just to seem quick.
Which leads right into no more quick decisions. Especially for future stuff.
Oh, yeah. Saying yes instantly to a trip or a speaking gig months down the line. We often underestimate the commitment or forget other things might come up.
We're bad at predicting our future selves.
Totally. So his advice is simple. Take a day or two, think it through, even if it seems straightforward. Don't just react.
He mentions his own writing routine needing consistency.
And how even short trips throw it off. It's about knowing yourself and what you need to function well before committing.
Okay, so we're thinking hard, we're being deliberate, but then he says, release your mind.
Right, because you can't just grind constantly. He talks about his early days, super intense reading and writing, burning himself out.
Hitting those mental walls.
Yeah, but he reframes those walls. Instead of seeing them as just failure or burnout, maybe they're a sign you're pushing boundaries, about to break through to a new level.
So the key is take a break.
Exactly. Step back. Rejuvenate. Do something different, relaxing. Let your mind recover. That downtime is often when the insights actually happen.
Like incubation.
Precisely.
He also suggests something interesting. Draw your thoughts.
Yeah, visual thinking. He points out it came before language, and it's still super powerful. Think Leonardo da Vinci's notebook.
All of those sketches and diagrams.
Yeah, right. Foroux found that drawing simple images for his blog posts actually helped him clarify his ideas, forced him to think visually.
It gets you out of that constant internal chatter.
It can, yeah. Whether it's graphs, highlighting words, simple cartoons, it's another way to process information. He even says this book started with that chaos to clarity drawing.
That makes sense. Then there's be yourself, not what you should be. Big topic.
Huge. He quotes Descartes. Conquer yourself rather than the world. It's all about self-knowledge first.
And he asked those probing questions. What are your real strengths, weaknesses? How do you learn best? What do you actually enjoy or hate?
Yeah, it's about doing an honest self-assessment. Because if you don't know yourself...
You make bad choices.
Yeah.
Wrong jobs, wrong relationships.
Exactly. He uses his own life as examples. Knowing yourself is step one, but then acting on that knowledge is step two.
Recognizing if an opportunity truly fits you or if it's just something you feel you should do.
Right. And realizing that, honestly, most things probably won't be a perfect fit. And that's okay.
All this requires reflection, though. Take time to reflect.
Which is hard when life is so busy. But he stresses how crucial it is. He shares feeling lost when he neglected it himself.
He mentions journaling.
Yeah, says lots of smart, happy people do it. Focus on lessons learned, mistakes, achievements. It helps consolidate things.
He suggests writing your own autobiography. That sounds intense.
Maybe as a starting point for deeper reflection. He describes his own weekly routine journaling, rereading notes, says it helps spot mistakes, value progress, and just organize thoughts for better decisions.
Okay, shifting slightly. My money rules. How does that fit with thinking straight?
Well, he starts with a friend feeling trapped by money, needing a job they hate. Money worries can really cloud your thinking.
So his rules are designed to reduce that worry.
Exactly. Devalue money's importance in your head. There are 5. 1, always have 6 months' expenses saved. 2, invest in skills. 3, invest money. Don't just spend it needlessly.
Don't buy stuff you don't need.
Right. And 5, remember, money is replaceable. Time isn't. Following these, he argues, minimizes the mental space money worries take up.
Practical stuff. But then another seeming contradiction. Don't try to think your way out of everything.
Haha, yeah. The paradox is sometimes forcing the thinking, overthinking, actually leads to worse ideas.
Like when good ideas pop up in the shower.
Yeah.
When you're not actively trying.
Exactly. There's value in letting your attention wander, in consciously stopping the focused effort.
He says we can choose to let go of thoughts, like relaxing a muscle.
That's the analogy. Whether it's through yoga, meditation, or just learning to find inner quiet on your own, the key is developing that ability to mentally step back.
So it's a balance, focused thinking and letting go.
Both are crucial for effective thinking and creativity.
Okay, then he encourages us. Be unconventional.
Yeah, he basically says conventional thinking gives conventional results. If you want something different, you might need to think differently.
He criticizes the pros and cons list.
Says it's simple, but often shallow, especially for big life decisions like relationships or quitting jobs. Tends to be generic.
So instead of this or that,
think this and do that. Abundant thinking. He gives his own example of working a job while building his business. Not choosing one or the other immediately.
The maze analogy helps here too.
Right. Conventional thinking keeps you stuck inside the maze walls. Unconventional thinking is like getting a helicopter view. Maybe the goal isn't even in the maze you thought you were in.
Okay, what about don't ask why? Isn't understanding why something happened important?
Sometimes, but Foroux argues it can be a trap. He tells a story about a costly email mistake he made. Laziness, basically.
And the lessons were?
Always double check, small things matter, don't cut corners. But dwelling on why was I so lazy wasn't the productive part.
The focus should be on fixing it or preventing it next time.
Exactly. Focus on what you can do. Asking why can sometimes just become unproductive rumination. He also links this to avoiding excellence, using perfectionism as an excuse when it's really fear.
But then, right after, he says, think about the details even more.
It's about where you focus the detail. Not endlessly analyzing the why of a past mistake, but meticulously focusing on the details required to do things well now and in the future. The devil is in the detail.
He talks about writing this book itself.
Yeah, the huge amount of research, editing, even changing the title multiple times to get it right. That final title, Think Straight, was a detailed choice for impact. Paying attention to detail is just doing the job properly.
So improve thinking to improve action, which leads to take thinking out of the equation.
Right. The end goal isn't just to sit around thinking beautifully. It's to act more effectively.
So use habits and systems.
Exactly. Automate things where you can. His example is exercise, have clear rules, a set routine, so you don't have to decide every time. You just do it.
Thinking then comes in when the system isn't working.
Or needs adjustment, yeah. Use thinking strategically to build effective systems, not for every single action.
Things get a bit more personal with don't live with regrets.
He shares that touching story about his grandmother and her lifelong regret over a decision.
And the lesson is, we regret inaction more.
Generally, yes. We regret the things we didn't do, the chances not taken, more than the things we did, even if they weren't perfect. So, if you have a strong desire based on clear thinking,
go for it.
Lean towards action.
And related to that, never look back. Is that realistic?
Well, he means don't dwell there. He admits he's very present-focused. He argues too much attachment to the past stops you from living now.
Like keeping old phones or files you never look at.
Yeah. He says the only really useful reason to look back is to learn, which he does through his journaling.
He shares that example of the membership site he started and stopped.
Right. He evaluated it, learned lessons, extracted the value, and then moved on. Look back to learn, but don't set up camp there. Life happens now.
So, summing up a lot of this, spend your time well. Time is limited.
And thinking can be a great use of time or a total waste. Effective thinking leads to effective action.
And he lists effective thoughts.
Yeah, things like improving your life, growing your career business, visualizing the future, new ideas, problem solving, planning fun stuff, thoughts that move you forward.
But it takes effort to stay in that mode.
Constant effort. And he warns against getting so lost in thought you miss life itself. Sometimes you need to just stop thinking and start feeling. Be present.
Which brings us to the ultimate goal, maybe inner calm.
That's how he frames it. Mastering your mind isn't about becoming emotionless. It's about achieving a state of inner calm that isn't dependent on external chaos.
And that comes from practice, meditation, mindfulness.
Daily practice, yeah. He demystifies meditation. It's just sitting, being with thoughts, observing them, letting them go, not necessarily emptying the mind, but not being controlled by it.
And you can access that calm anywhere.
That's the goal. It's an internal skill, not reliant on cushion or incense.
Finally, think beyond yourself, bringing it back to pragmatism.
Yeah, and William James again. He tells the story of Charles Sanders Peirce, who James credited as the founder of pragmatism.
Even though Peirce struggled while James succeeded.
Right. James was generous, focusing on the practical value of Peirce's ideas. It's about contribution.
He quotes Louis Menand.
All our decisions are bets. We can't know anything for sure. We just make the best bet based on what seems useful and likely.
And that final James quote is powerful.
The greatest use of a life is to spend it on something that will outlast it. Creating useful things, things that matter to others, that's where meaning comes from, according to this view.
Wow. Okay, that was a really thorough dive into Think Straight.
Yeah, lots of practical stuff in there. Hopefully you've picked up a few strategies, things you can try out.
Absolutely. I mean, a core idea really sticks, doesn't it? That you do have power over your thoughts, and that directing them better can genuinely change things for you.
Definitely. So maybe take a moment to think about the ideas we covered. How might they apply to your own life, your own thinking habits?
And if you want to go deeper into pragmatism itself, those recommendations are a good sheet. William James's own work, the biography by Perry, Menand's reader.
Lots to explore there.
So, as we wrap up, maybe a question for you to mull over. Now that we've unpacked all this, what's maybe one useless thought pattern you recognize in yourself, one you might be ready to start letting go of to make a bit more space for clarity and action?